Yep.
Okay, so he's been called the flashiest guitarist, the coolest guitarist. If you're a fan of MTR, probably know about Mr. Nice Guy. But this is only the Grammy Award-winning Steve Stevens.
I like that intro.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Welcome to the UK.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Sorry about the weather.
That's all right. It's actually not that bad.
Really?
Yeah.
That's because it's a novelty because you're used to the sun.
Right, yeah.
But give it a month in this weather, you'll be like, I need to go home.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
how are you?
I'm
You're here
great.
with-
Yeah, great. First
you're-
gig, first show of this tour.
It's nice to see you, both of you. Over 30 years in the business.
Yeah, well, yeah, with Billy, I met Billy in 1982.
32 years.
So yeah, it's a while.
Some marriages don't last that long, Steve.
Yeah.
You could go to prison for murder in that time.
Yeah.
So this gentleman, he can play flamenco, folk, rock, he played everything. Billy Idol was quoted as saying, "You're all the genres in this."
Oh, that's nice.
7.5 years, wasn't it, when you had your first guitar?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in an area where, you know, this was a time when, you know, protest music was really important. And there was a well-known protest singer from my neighborhood named Phil Oakes, who at the time was as important as Bob Dylan, but was actually more subversive. My first, I don't know if you have Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts?
Yeah,
yeah, right. So my first Cub Scout, mother got expelled because she taught us how to sing Phil Oakes songs, and they found out, so it was like, oh, very un-American. So yeah, but guitar was a very, very important thing in my neighborhood. Everyone played, and I grew up about a mile from the beach, so at night everyone would bring acoustic guitars down there and play folk songs.
Really? You're self-taught?
Yeah, a combination of both. You know, my parents tried to get me a teacher when I was, really young, and I couldn't relate. You know, they wanted to teach me all this kind of funny, dirty, stuff. You know, and I wanted to play Rolling Stones, Beatles, all that. So, so all of that stuff really was self-taught. The rock and roll side was self-taught, but there's a high school in New York called High School of Performing Arts, which was what they based movie Fame on.
Yeah.
So in order to get into that school, I had to learn how to play classical guitar. And I sort of faked it. And I got a really cool teacher who showed me how to turn the pages. So it looked like I knew what I was doing. Yeah.
See, our show it's called Soul because we feature artists and musicians that perform on the soul. And we're tending to find people like Jimi Hendrix and Nat King Cole, like we're all self-taught, and well, my theory is they're performing from the soul, because you're teaching yourself from the soul, so it's like an extension of your soul, so you're performing what comes through your head. But you've even incorporated toys from Reagan.
Yeah, I mean,
He brings a toy on stage.
well, yeah, I practiced my whole life, and the thing I'm known for is, hey, how do you make that noise? But yeah, when Billy and I first got together, he had obviously come from the 1977 punk rock school, and their whole thing was, if you're gonna have a flash guitar solo, it's got to be more than just a bunch of notes and just showing off for the sake of like some gymnastic event or something. So I was kind of forced to think in other terms of how can I do guitar solos and make them sonically very cool, like blasts of sound. And that led me down the road to using like toys, like little ray guns. I would doctor them, take them apart and stuff. And I started to play them through the guitar, and that became a kind of signature thing.
Have you, some people's signature, Steve, is setting fire to the guitar or smashing up the guitar. Your signature's you, right?
Yeah, well, I could never afford to smash up my guitar.
So, Kings and Queens of the Underground is what this tour is with Billy. I've seen a few interviews of yours recently, and you always seem to have Billy's best interests at heart, which is absolutely commendable for you, considering you're known for been such a fantastic guitarist in different genres. You've worked with people like Robert Palmer, you've done the same for Top Gun, you've worked on that, you've worked on Michael Jackson's band. Is there you've been everywhere. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to go? Anybody else you'd like to perform with?
That's a good question. I mean, you know...
Anybody left you haven't performed with?
Peter Gabriel would be pretty cool to work with, yeah. See, I'm one of those guitar players who really loves the structure and the exploration of working on songs, rather than, you know, some guitar players get caught up in the kind of the mechanics of the guitar. And I think once you realize when you've had a long-term career with a singer, and the songs take on a more significance than anything, there's nothing better than being in front of, you know, a crowd of people, and you go into a song or play a riff or something, and they all know it, and they can remember it, and they can hum it, as opposed to, I couldn't imagine getting in front of them and going, you know, and them going, yeah, that's really great, you know, like, you know, you want to play things people can remember, so.
And you even share that. You have, Steve, if you don't know, Steve has a YouTube channel where he teaches you how to play Rebel Yell and some of the classics of Billy Idol. So it's fabulous that you can share that knowledge with people. What song of Billy Idol's and Billy Idol's you enjoy the most to perform?
Well, obviously playing the new material is fresh and it's exciting, and there's a sense of you know, this, you know, discovery in it, because we're, you know, it's a fresh new record. Right, how we're going to make it work live and all that. So, yeah, we did.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, Marley had a flat with the studio.
Well, it was Island Records studio, so it was Chris Blackwell's studio. So all of the Island recording artists were there along with
I think that Jimi Hendrix's studio. Does it have a sort of vibe that inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky that we've gotten to work on legendary studios. You know, from the very first record. When we did the first Idol record, Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones were down the hall working off the wall. So we've always, and then when we did When I Smile, the Stones were in the next room. So it's, you know, I mean, it's kind of the most hard because more and more studios are closing, people are doing their work laptops. So, but this record, we did get to work from the studio, so it's quite cool.
Did you, when you're on stage and so on, is there a time through this whole period, over 30 years, like you're saying, when you thought, this is exactly where I wanted to be?
Yeah, every night.
There's not many jobs you can do that, is there, feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I would go to concerts and I just knew at an early age when I was, you know, 12, 13 years old, going, that's what I want to do, you know. I just can't remember a time in my life ever when guitar or music wasn't in my life. So it's a natural thing, and it's you know, I guess I'm lucky that I still love playing the damn thing. You know?
I really wanted you to swear. Yeah. This gentleman is the only person, rock star, if I can say, that swears, and it doesn't even sound like swearing. He says fucking a lot, but it doesn't even sound like a swear word, it just blends right in.
I try.
Self-censored.
So you mentioned like the digital age and everything else. When you started to know a lot of things are digital, has that affected you in a good way or not so good way?
You almost have to fight it, you know, as a guitar player, because my reference point is all the early 70s English stuff. I hated American bands when I was
You like Led Zeppelin?
Yeah, well, it's Led Zeppelin and King Crimson and all that kind of, that was the golden age of guitar playing for me, was, you know, from the late 60s. And look, you know, the greatest guitar player in the world had to come here and we discovered Jimi Hendrix. You know, he was no one in the States would even give him a shot. So I think there's a you know, for me, that tradition and that reference point of say 1967 when Hendrix came here to 1973 with Queen and Brian May. That's the golden era of guitar playing, and those are all analog recording guitars, and they're long and they sound like you can almost hear the guy's sweat on the string. So when you go in and record digitally, you have to fight the sterility of it. So I try and use all like tube equipment, older amplifiers, and lots of older vintage stuff.
Speaking of amplifiers, you've got your name to an amplifier.
Yeah, we do. But it's it's essentially a design that's based on a 1967 Marshall amplifier. And I have a bunch of old vintage amplifiers, but they're not roadworthy. So I got with a friend of mine, Dave Freeman, and we designed an amplifier that's got a vintage thing as well as having the reliability of the music.
So Kings and Queens of the Underground, I listened to it. I mean, I've been a fan of Billy Idol and songs since Generation X, 1977, which I know. But this album, it has an honesty about it, if I can put it that way. After I've listened to it and then read his book, which everybody's been writing something for, I was hearing different things after reading the book. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of, you can almost hear pain and torture and regret and all those emotions that I didn't hear the first time because I'm trying to hear some references in the book. Was that a conscious thing when you two came together for this?
I think the aspect of this record that is very different is that knowing that Billy was working on his book at the same time, a lot of the ideas for the songs lyrically came before the music, which is the complete opposite of how we always worked before. And we'd work on pure adrenaline before. All right,
is this the boots and scarves?
Just like hammering out something, and then he'd go off and write something to some riffs that we had. But this time around, there was a real story to it. And obviously, I met Billy when he first arrived in the States in 1982. And then our other co-writer, Billy Morrison, grew up in Bromley. And used to actually sneak in to see Generation X shows. So he had two co-writers to work with him that knew his history, beyond just the music stuff, the personal stuff. And so, one day Billy would walk in and say, let's write something about when I first came to New York and some of the people that were around, the other musicians that maybe aren't around anymore, but still influenced us. We came up with things like Ghosts in My Guitar, which is like, the souls and the spirits of all those people, all those amazing New York characters are still with us, and we still reminisce about them, and they still live on in our music. So it's a very romantic way of looking at songwriting, and I think it allowed us to really have the courage to put the words out there and not over-embellish things, let them be as they were.
So we're going to get Steve Stevens autobiography? Stephen Joseph?
Yeah, I don't know.
A whole encyclopedia. All the people you've worked with.
Yeah, but I think we'll let people digest Billy's book for a while.
That might take a while, to be fair. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. And thank you for coming back to the UK. It's been a little while, so hopefully you'll be back soon. That's
my pleasure.
Talk to us.
Yeah,
Nice to
great.
meet
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.